Hello and welcome back, and today we're going to be doing 10GBE testing of the brand new Synology DS1621XS. We're going to be looking at Blackmagic, we're going to be looking at AJA, and we're going to do some Windows file testing. In another video we're going to do some video editing, but for now let's concentrate on the speed test. Now let's talk about our parameters first. We are utilising a Windows PC, we are using an i7 here. It's a 6th gen i7 there, and it's also got 16 gig of memory. This device connected via Thunderbolt into a Thunderbolt to 10GBE adapter, and that is running into the brand new Synology 1621XS Plus. This device is populated with 6 10TB Ultrastar series hard drives. We've got them in a RAID 6 environment. We're going to show you that on the screen in just a little bit. And we have enabled encryption as well. We're using the default 8 gig of memory, and we are running with 2 NVMEs for caching. So that is our setup. We've gone for this in what I would think would be a great enterprise grade setup. Encryption, RAID 6, caching, all enabled. And then we're going to do our speed test. If we get time, we're going to do a few other configurations along the way, but we do have a lot of testing to get through with this device over numerous videos. I'm talking to you here on camera, and occasionally we're going to flick to the screen, but it is worth highlighting that because we are using OBS screen recording, that can affect our results and can normally knock off somewhere between 10 to 50 megabytes per second. So it can make all the difference. So do bear that in mind with our results. But as this is a 4-bay and we're utilizing 10 disks with 2 of them giving way to parity, it's going to be interesting to see how that affects if cache helps at all. And with MTU set to 9000 on both the network connection of the laptop and the NAS, whether removing all of these restrictions will give us some great performance benchmarks. So let's make our way over to this screen now. And again, we are going to keep flicking back to camera from time to time. As you can see, we have OBS there on screen. If we make our way into the PC, you can see there is our Sonnet Solo 10G adapter. And if we go into a little bit more detail, we can go there, go into the configuration, head up to the tab, go to Jumbo Packet, and as you can see, Jumbo frames at 9000 on my local machine. Also, if we go into the control panel of this NAS itself, you can see we're connected via the 10G connection, and there's our MTU at 10,000. Now, we should have already created a shared folder on this device. If we go into the storage manager, we can then take a good look, go up here, and we'll be able to see that RAID 6 that we've created. And there's our RAID 6 there, an AES-NI. We've already made a volume in advance. And again, we've got the encryption enabled. We've got our RAID 6. We've got our 6 disks there. And there's all our 6 disks in the RAID 6 environment. And the SSD cache, we're using 2 of the SNV 3400 Synology SSDs for our SSD caching. So there is the architecture. We've already put some data on the device, not a vast amount, but enough that the cache has worked a little bit there in the background and provided some cache benefits there in real time. So as you can see, we've not got a huge amount of data on there. We've kept things nice and light. So what we're going to do is leave the SSD cache there on screen while we do our testing. We're also going to create a shared folder. So in order to do that, we want to open Synology Assistant. There is the 16, as you can see. We're connected via the 169. The 192 up there on our 920 is the network. But right now we are directly connected to this NAS over 10G. We're going to right click. We're going to map a network drive. We're going to log into this device. From there, we can see one of the network drives, and we're going to go for the one that one of the apps has created by default. We're going to assign a letter to that, which is going to go for letter S. And from there, open the map drive just to double check that it sees it. And voila, there is our S drive right there. So that is that folder there, as you can see on screen. So again, we're going to leave that caching open there on screen. If we go into the PC folder, we're able to see there is our mapped network drive right there. So let's start the first test. Let's go for AJA. And again, we're going to go for a nice 1 gig file for the first time around, 1080p. And we're going to make sure to select Active Backup Suite folder. From there, make our way over. We're going to make sure there's no disk caching enabled. It's going to be read and write testing, and it's going to be running continuously. Now, bear in mind, we are using a standard SATA SSD inside this PC here. If we go back into the PC folder, and we go back in, we're able to see that if we go into drive information, go into the right one, go into computer, we're able to see a little bit more information about the setup of this device. And as you can see, we are utilizing quite a moderate system here, and it is a SATA single SSD inside this device, which will affect some of our results. But let's run a test here. So let's run the first initial test. And as you can see, we are already hitting, let's hit to the live camera so you can see it there. We are hitting 1,000 write thanks to those 4 drives and that SSD caching there inside. At the end of this video, we are going to remove the cache and see if that makes any difference to those overall performance stats. But we can definitely see some great numbers there. Let's nip back straight onto the screen. And again, that is a 1 gig test file, but it is worth highlighting. Remember that the read will be affected by that SATA disk that we're running there. So ignore the fact that the write seems higher than the read. A lot of that is to do with my internal system recording with OBS in real time, and the fact that we're using a SATA SSD connected to this system. So let's stop there. Let's go for a bigger file. Let's go to 4 gig, restart the test. And even at a 4 gig file that takes a little bit more time there, we're definitely seeing those results maintained over 10G on this Xeon powered NAS. And again, this is the base level unit, but we have attached those extra bits of hardware there in the form of those SSDs inside. And although this is a 16 gig upgrade as well, what I will say of that is that that's going to make almost no impact whatsoever on this test. We've increased the memory for a surveillance video coming up very, very soon. You can't really see it, but we have a bunch of cameras dotted around right now that we're using for our surveillance video, using the 920 and the 1621. So let's stop that test and make our way into a 16 gig file, much bigger file here. And this is one that's going to take a little while. We're only going to do 1 rotation of read and write on this, but we're still getting that 900. It is going to dip fragmentally as it goes through, because again, this is where those caching the caching SSDs have almost no utility whatsoever. But we are going to see a lower overall performance, but 16 gigs still getting 800 megabytes out of those 6 drives, and a RAID 6 with encryption being enabled is still pretty impressive indeed. While it's doing that, why don't we open up the resource monitor there in the background and get a good look about what this system is doing there in the background. We'll leave that up for the remainder of the video. Let's minimize that as well so we can fit a little bit more on screen. Pop that there, head back into AJA. AJA, that's the wrong one. Let's put that on there. So in the end, the read went down to 550, but again, that's because we reached the limitations of that internal SSD of this laptop. But still, we are seeing great numbers there, and you can see all those performance stats there of the resource monitor there too. Move that down ever so slightly. And there you go, we've gone through the 3 different sizes of AJA. So now let's make our way onto Blackmagic. We're going to leave those stats that are on screen. They're all going to spike down to 0. As you can see, memory utilization, there was no difference whatsoever. But we can see that Xeon CPU pipped into the 20% mark there, maybe 25% of utilization during these tests. So next up, we're going to make our way into the Blackmagic software. So from there, we're just going to move Blackmagic onto this side of the screen. And once again, using that same mapped network drive, we're going for 1G, got to select the drive. Still trying to find a drive from a previous test. There it is there. And we're going to go ahead with a 1G test file right now. So if I flick back here onto the screen, you can see that test running. And what's quite interesting during this, and we will flick back to that screen in a second, is the noise. While we've been conducting this video, the mic is right here. I'm just going to lift it for you guys. It's just there. That microphone is very, very close to this system that's utilizing those 10 TB drives. So this gives you a real representation of how much noise there is, given that this is actually closer to the mic than I am. So let's give it a second. Be quiet. And I'm going to move the mic now between these 2 devices. I'm going to move it between my laptop, where the GPU fan is starting to really kick in, and then back to the NAS. So I'm going to be very quiet while I lift the mic. Now, I don't know how that sounded to your ears, but to me right now, this laptop's making more noise than this system here. The fan of that GPU has really kicked in there. Now, if we're flicking back to the Blackmagic test, we're certainly seeing different results this time around for Blackmagic. Blackmagic is not really, in terms of right, getting out of that 350, 360, because Blackmagic is using a different algorithm there, and the caching is far, far less beneficial in this setup. What's going to be quite interesting, though, as we leave this test of Blackmagic at the 1G test file, is when we go for a bigger file, because that's when we start to see Blackmagic bring a lot more to the table. So as you can see, the write speed there has increased notably in that larger test file, and that's because the 1G test file did not give Blackmagic sufficient time to kind of burn in that whole test and get a better medium graph of speed. All that time spinning up was being recognized and not true overall performance. So as you can see, the 5G test file is still giving us a lovely max out there on write, but read, we're seeing that dip, that SATA internal drive and the performance limitations it does bring in. Now, I will say once again, unfortunately, Blackmagic does not go higher than a 4K 5G test file. So unfortunately, we're not able to take it even further than that in Blackmagic. But what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over to a Windows file transfer, and we're just going to dump several gig of files onto that shared folder. So let's come out there. This time we're going to head back into this. We're going to go into my archive, and this is a lot of the backups and stuff that we've run. Just going to select a big old pile of photos, find out what the storage is on that one. So again, that's 75 gig. That's a little bit more than we want to play with in this, but do you know what? Let's do it anyway. And now we're going to copy 75 gig of data of mixed files and folders. Let's have a look at it there. It's 75 gig that's comprised of 66 folders over just over 9,000 individual files. And again, there's Word docs, video docs, and more from previous videos there. We're going to copy those and copy those directly into this shared folder. Now, this is going to be quite interesting because caching has no assistance here whatsoever. This is writing to the NAS, so chances are the limitations of my own internal SATA are going to present a bottleneck. But let's go ahead and copy that into the shared folder, and as we can see, that speed is going to creep up, and the graph that we see on screen during this is where we're going to see my internal SSD become the limitation, because as we deal with the larger files, then there's going to be a slowdown. The small files, that's where there's going to be the distinction across that graph. But right now, 10% in, we can see that we are getting those speeds of 300 to 400 meg. Now, a lot of that is to do with my internal SSD. We're not really going to see vastly more than that. Now, had I been running maybe a dual NVMe system over 10G, things have been very, very different. If you are running a photo video setup, if you are editing files on a NAS and you want to take advantage of that, always remember that your internal hardware of your laptop, your PC or your Mac system may present all the difference. I think the last two generations of MacBook and Mac Tower system have utilized NVMe SSD, which allows somewhere between 1800 to 4 or even 5,000 megabytes per second with the right PCIe available to you. So do remember, if you are going to be doing 10 GBE live photo video editing, that your internal SSD is not going to present yourself a bottleneck, because right now you're seeing there on screen my internal SSD presenting a larger bottleneck overall. And as we deal with lots of smaller files, that's another area of contention. And as you see, lots of those files there in the background are old legacy files. You're seeing old NASs there as well, and they're really slowing things down. And that's not the fault of the NAS, it's very much the fault of the host system. But we're going to stop that there. And what we're going to do now is make our way into the Synology NAS system. I'm then going to remove our area of SSD cache. We're going to completely remove it. And therefore, when it's removing, let's log in. This will now unmount our storage system. When it unmounts the storage system, it's going to disable the cache, remove it by wiping the cache, and then re-enable the storage system for us. And from there, the same mapped network drive will exist, the same data on the system will still exist, but now it will not have the benefits of those two NVMe SSD caching bays. So it's going to be interesting to see when we run the Blackmagic test and the AJA test if it actually gave us any benefit whatsoever. Now, the amount of time this takes to wipe will change depending on the amount of data on them and the size of your storage array. So we're going to fast forward now to the completion of the removal and unmounting of the NVMe SSD cache. Let's fast forward. Right, so the cache has been removed now, and we can make our way back into the volume there, and as you see, the volume is still mounted. If we go into the file station application, we're able to take a good look at the files, and that's some of the files that we transferred earlier during that initial test. We're just going to go ahead and delete those there. There isn't a recycle bin, so that won't present a problem. On top of that, what we're going to do now is let that do its thing while it deletes some of those files. You should do that pretty nippy there in the background. Open that up, it should be pretty quick. Once that's done, we can make our way into AJA and make sure we can run those tests to keep things nice and even. Right, so now we're done. Let's start with the first stage of testing. What we're going to do is go ahead with AJA, and once again we're going to flick down to a 1 GB test file. We're still in the active backup mapped drive, still the same settings across the board. Let's begin our test. Now straight away, the write speed has been maxed out even quicker this time around. Now, a lot of that is because of the cache having to build there in the background. As we were running our original test, files were being written to the NAS, and while it was doing that, you could see in the early stages that the cache was working in the background. What are those files are the same? What needs to be cached? And that, on this stage of testing, did slow things down. But you may notice that the read speed was better as well. A lot of what you're seeing right now on screen isn't because it's better without cache, but because of the initial utilization of cache at the beginning, the system was balancing several things, including building the cache. Over time, however, the cache would have provided better results overall. If we move that there to camera, the cache would have been better overall in terms of read and write speed, but initialization such as this shows us with the write speed consistently maxing out the connection at 1020, 1030, and the read speed being pretty high. It'll be interesting to see once again, once we start increasing that file size, whether the limitation of that internal hard drive will make all of the difference. So again, we are seeing there that 1000 still being maintained in terms of the read, but with in terms of the write, but the read there still standing by its guns at around 700, which is still great to see. We are, I'm glad that this device is giving us that 1000 megs that we wanted. If I was editing some of the videos like this one directly on a NAS, something I do, I would expect speeds like this to be consistent, particularly on a hard drive array of RAID 6 with encryption enabled. That's the key thing here. A number of you will look at this video and say, so what? It's a 10G NAS. I should expect 10 gigabit Ethernet. But you've got to remember, with a RAID 6 and double parity to be built there, as well as AES-NI encryption in the background, meaning that file transit needs a little bit of work to do the encryption algorithm in the background. It's still lovely to see those numbers still reaching those heights. So if we flick now to the 16 gig file, let that finish there. And again, we're still living in the thousands. It's still great to see that utilizing standard hard drives inside, as a standard Pro Series enterprise drives, 250 mega drive, adding maybe 100 to 120 per drive in a RAID environment. It's still great to see that we're even at the 16 gig test file area, that we're getting those great speeds there. Now, the read is trying its hardest. It's living at that 700, but we're going to start to see that dip. And again, you can see there where the cache was trying to learn there in the background and how that did pip a little bit of the performance. But let's head now over to Blackmagic and have a quick look there. And again, going to go for a 1 gig test file. And again, we're going to see that spin up, that gradual spin up over time. Let's let it do its growing, but it's going to really struggle to get out of that initial spin up there on this system over 10G, particularly in that RAID environment and all the bits and bobs the system has to do there in the background. But read is still showing a nice consistent number, which is always good, but I think we're not really going to see those results until we hit 5 gigabyte test files here on Blackmagic, and straight away we've maxed out that 1026 once again, with the read getting a little bit pinch higher as well, but still consistently living there in the 700s. if you are going to do stuff like this and you do use an NVMe SSD, these results indicate to me that an NVMe powered system connected via 10GBE to this is going to give you 1,000 each way without any difficulty, which is great to see. Now, what do we take from this? Well, we can take that this system, even with hard drives, is going to give you that 1000 megs. Yes, these are enterprise hard drives at 7200 RPM and a good 256 meg cache, which can't be overlooked. But in a RAID 6 with AES encryption on those drives and still hitting 1000 with clear indications that it could go higher if we use a 2-port 10G lag system. That will be interesting, and maybe that's something we'll follow up into our next video. But next, in my next video, I am going to be working on surveillance with this system, a multi-camera environment. You can't really make it out right now, but I have 4 Reolink cameras dotted all around the place right now out of shot. And after that, we are going to be doing a video editing and virtual machine test on this NAS. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have found this video helpful, and do check out my 5v5 and review of this NAS here on the channel. There should be links in the description. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Do click like if you've enjoyed the video, and click subscribe to learn more. Visit NAS Compares to learn more about NAS, and of course visit guysatSpan.com if you want to buy your NAS today. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time.